Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of our Public Health Plus series. My name is Michelle James, and I am the Senior Director of Alumni Engagement at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University here in Atlanta, Georgia. This series was created by the Rollins School of Public Health's Alumni Board Career Development Committee in partnership with our good friends at Orange Sparkle Ball to examine the spaces where public health intersects with other disciplines, discuss that work, and then hopefully broaden our thinking. We are thrilled today to have Lidas Barrera and Srishti Jain Kawatra in conversation to explore the intersection of public health and food systems. They will discuss how Feeding India, India's first and now largest organization fighting hunger and food waste, has worked within existing food systems to mitigate food waste and work towards addressing hunger across the country. So let's meet our speakers. Lidas will be our facilitator today, and she is a public health innovation analyst with Orange Sparkle Ball, an innovation and impact consultancy. As part of the Orange Sparkle Ball team, she works to develop public health communications, explores the intersection of implementation, science, innovation, and design, and analyzes quantitative and qualitative data. Her previous work was in community-based settings, working as an educator, the social service sector, and with nonprofit organizations at the local level. She holds dual degrees in public health and elementary education with minors in psychology and biology from the University of Miami. And I am very proud to say she is also one of our current students pursuing a Master's of Public Health and a certificate in the social determinants of health here at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory. Our very special guest speaker today is Srishti Jain Kawatra. Srishti is the co-founder of Feeding India, the country's first and now largest, as I said, organization fighting hunger and waste. She co-founded the organization in 2014 after learning of her colleagues' experience witnessing food waste at an Indian wedding. The thought of food for thousands going to waste in a country that has the highest number of undernourished people appalled her and left her wondering why no one had stepped up to take action. In 2019, she took the unique decision to merge Feeding India with Zomata to accelerate progress towards ending hunger in India. And in the process, gave rise to the first of a kind merger between a for-profit and nonprofit. Srishti has taken a remarkable journey in growing the organization from just 2 people in Delhi into a movement with 26,000 volunteers across 185 Indian cities. In the last 7 years, Feeding India has served 120 plus million meals, becoming one of the largest nonprofits in Asia. Through her work, Srishti aims to build a more equitable world where everyone has equal opportunity to pursue their dreams, specifically women and children. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator and speaker, Lidas and Srishti.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So Srishti, thank you so much for joining. I mean, me and Srishti actually met at a conference, and I was just so excited to get to speak with her and hear her story and share that with all of you. So I just want to say again, thank you, Srishti, for doing this, and I'm really excited to get into it with you. So let's just go ahead and start by, hearing a little bit about yourself and your background. Go ahead and give the audience a little bit of that background. Oh, Srishti, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
You're good.
Yeah, sorry. So I was saying, first of all, thank you for having me here. I think this was this conversation when you emailed about this seemed really exciting. And I think, we're going to have a great discussion. So let me just quickly get into that. Introducing myself, I am from Delhi, India. I have done my undergraduate degrees in business studies, and technically I do not have a background or educational qualification in social impact, but ventured into it anyways because I realized that was something that was needed at the time. I've I started at a very young age. I worked, like I did my business studies from undergraduate degree in Delhi. I worked in a lot of different internships, extracurricular activities, clubs and societies, where very early on, I got to, volunteer with a lot of organizations, learn basics of leadership, understand how young people could really make a difference. Moving on from then, after I graduated, I worked in a US based MNC for about 5 years, working in digital marketing and generic as a consultant. Then apart after that, actually in the first year when I was working there, like Michelle also introduced, my colleague went to a wedding where he saw massive amounts of food getting wasted, and that was really the inspiration to really start Feeding India. Since then, it's been approximately 7 years that I've been working on this organization, have grown it from just a very few people to one of the largest in the country and the fastest growing not-for-profits in Asia. And the main aim of the organization, of course, is to serve to the hungry people of the country. Yep, and of course, there have been a lot of unique decisions, things that have worked, things that have not worked along the way. But yep, I'm excited to share that with everyone.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that shift. Like, what was that like, just suddenly deciding you had, been in business school, a really different trajectory from how you ended up in this. So tell me a little bit about that shift and why you personally decided to take that, and what were some of the barriers and challenges that came up with that decision?
Sure. I think since a very early age, I have been very entrepreneurially driven. So even, when I was say 14, I used to, make my own stuff, sell it, go door to door, work with my mother's friends and, colleagues and sell my things to them. So I was always very entrepreneurially driven. So I knew that I wanted to do something that would have a larger impact. It could be monetarily or social impact, but nonetheless have wanted to do something of my own to really help other people or change or impact the lives of many people. At the same time, when I came across this problem of food wastage, I really realized that there was there's such an easy solution. I realized that there was so much food being wasted at one end, and at the same time our country has the highest number of hungry people in the world. So that really triggered me and left me wondering why no one had stepped up to take action to really solve this problem. So I thought, why not merge both? I always wanted to do something entrepreneurial, and I approached this problem in a very business point of view, wherein not looking at as something that I'm doing as charity, but some like a management problem to be solved by looking at why decades have been gone by, and there's so many organizations who are working to solve hunger, but we've still made very limited progress. So what are we doing wrong? What can we be done better, and how can we not just serve more meals but solve the problem? So I think the concept really excited me. Of course, this was a chance for me to help many people, at the same time pursue something that could help me expand to more job, help me serve more people in the process. So that was really my motivation from that shift of working in a corporate job to doing something um, socially driven at a very young age.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I just talk about challenges, I think it was a mix of personal and professional challenges. Uh, Professional, of course, because first of all, when I thought about starting Feeding India, there was no awareness in the country about excess food, right? It was still very taboo to see how can extra food be then given to someone else who is in need. So number one challenge was creating that level of empathy in the country and its people to say that this excess food can also be given to someone in need. So building that. Secondly, there was no solution in the country. Of course, that was stemming from the fact that there was no awareness, but because of a lack of solution, everything had to be done from scratch. We had to do our own research, had to get in touch with experts, learn from similar models outside, and develop that those solutions on our own. So a lot of time was spent in figuring out what to do, what works as per Indian context, and what could probably work or not work, and taking inspiration from different countries as well. I think the last challenge probably would be, on a personal level, that I was really young. I was 21 years old when I started, and just the general stereotypes in the country, and I'm sure there in in your country and different parts of the world as well, that charity is something that you do when you retire, right? And it's something that you don't take up when you're starting your career as your full-time career. This is something that you do by the side. So I think there were stereotypes of that. There were also that how could you leave your career in a global company or a job which was very steady, it was very guaranteed, it was predictable, with something that there is no guarantee, or there's no expected returns on something, right? So I think that was also a stereotype on how social impact could not be considered a career. And just I would say lastly, the general stereotypes of gender and age, that it was really difficult to convince stakeholders to number one, help us in the cause. There were people twice my age following age old habits, like decade long habits, and here I was like a 21-year-old girl going to them and saying, don't waste your food, give it to us. It was a conversation that was really difficult to win in the beginning. So I think those were a couple of challenges that, of course, making that shift from the business world to a not-for-profit world that I faced.
I think that was one of the things that really kind of stood out to me when when I first heard you present at that conference. I was like, oh my gosh, she's incredible. Like being so young and having the courage to kind of just step out and, do this. I'm curious, and I might put you on the spot here, but when you were, 21 years old and you decided to take this crazy leap, did you ever imagine yourself kind of being where you are now? Like, were there moments where you were scared of like doing this, like in that young state of mind? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I honestly never thought that it would be what it is today. I think the intention when we started was not to create an organization or to go to so many cities, or do and reach this level. I think it was just to solve a problem. It started from that idea that something needs to be done about this, and then it snowballed into something so big that none of us could have imagined at the time. I remember we were just two people in a meeting room who were drawing out things on a whiteboard and saying, oh, we want this Bollywood actor to someday come on our food drives, or we want this award from this person, etc. And just to think of it, all of these things came true. And it just seems, and at that time we were just making the most audacious goals that we thought would never be possible. But then somehow that translated into everything happening and falling into place and helping. And just in the process, we never thought the kind of growth that we've seen over the years and the kind of lives that it has impacted, we would never be able to see that. For us, it was just serving meals and helping solve a problem. And I think the idea really connected well with people, and it became what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for all of that background and, getting a little vulnerable with us. I think that's really exciting to kind of just hear how much, you personally have grown and how much you've really contributed to the growth of the organization. So with that, I want to shift into talking a little bit about Feeding India. So can you just tell us a little bit about, the organization as a general broad oversense, and anything you think the audience would like to know about Feeding India?
Sure. So the organization, essentially, we're a not-for-profit organization, and the main aim is to solve hunger in the country. Of course, how we tackle that problem is through many solutions that we have, solving the problem of hunger at various levels. It is either done through serving freshly cooked meals, serving dry, groceries, or rescuing excess food. The entire idea of the organization is not, like I said, not just to serve more meals, but to eventually solve the problem of hunger and end or reduce the number of hungry people in the country. So India actually has the highest number of hungry people in the world. And at the same time, we waste so much food as well. And we produce as a country enough food to feed our population for the entire 2 years at a go, right? So there is not a lack of food available, but the problem is access to that food. And in different parts of the country, it's either access or nutrition of the food. So what Feeding India does is gives food as an incentive to people to become self-sufficient in the long run. So it's not just giving giving food for in a random manner of to people on the streets, but we actually encourage, say for example, children, especially able people, elderly, abandoned women, all of these people to come to either a school or a skill development center, learn how to upskill themselves, and food acts as a motivation for them to be there, do not drop out, be healthy and attended. And in the long run, they become contributing members of the society and become employable, so they no longer have to beg for food. So that is a little bit about our theory of change. And Feeding India currently is present in across 181 cities in the country. And in the last few years, we've served around 120 million meals and above. And just in the last year, actually, we've served around around 70 million meals because of COVID, because we realized that India actually dropped down the hunger list. So that is a little bit about what organization does to tackle the problem of food and hunger. And
Yeah, that's perfect. Another thing that kind of really excited me about the organization, and I'd love if you could touch on that, was the way that you guys kind of tackled the problem within multiple like systems, right? Like you guys thought about not only tackling like food waste and like directing the food, but you did it in like really interesting ways where you were using other like non-traditional methods. So can you talk a little bit about some of those different methods that you guys used when developing the program that were kind of like out of the box, and I'm sure it got you a lot of like weird looks when you came to your partners and were like, what if we do this?
yeah. No, of course, I think everything for us, it was very organic. So when we started out, we realized that the different needs that the society and the food systems really came out of these food systems. And then we started working and developing solutions for each of these needs. So for example, like I said, when we started, it was just the two people that we were. And the main problem at that time was, how do we serve more meals, which was number one, sustainable, and number two, at zero or very less cost, right? So the easy solution, and because at that time we could not fundraise or spend a lot of money, the easy solution was to get volunteers. And that is how literally our volunteer program started, which is now more than 27,000 people serving, in more than 100 cities in the country. And this is like a self-organized system where they're divided into in their own hierarchies, and all of this is a volunteer model. So we have national, state, city groups till the zip code level. So it would literally be people around you in your street, in your zip code, who want to be solving hunger together, and they would get together and help. They would go to, and they would self-divide themselves in different departments, like any organization would. So there would be one department looking at food partnerships. There would be one team looking at identifying beneficiaries. Another team would be looking at marketing. The third team would be looking at recruitment. So these are volunteers who have divided themselves and according to their own motivations and time commitments and age groups. So that is one solution, how we involve the public to help us serve meals in a more scalable manner at efficient costs and more sustainably. The second solution that we developed, once we started, was we realized that there's a lot of places where there's food in bulk quantities available, and volunteers are not able to solve that. So it was very organic that we realized that corporate cafeterias, weddings, these have a lot of food wasted at huge quantities and in odd hours. And volunteers, because they're not able to make it, we came up with a model of something like an Uber pool, where we had like a 24/7 running vehicle that would pick up excess food and donate it. So it would be that like a, if you're staying in, say, north part of the city, and there are 3 places where there is excess food available, the van would pick up from 1, 2nd, and 3rd. So instead of running all around in directions and say picking up 100 meals, they would go to one building, go to 3 floors within those buildings, and pick up food from each of these offices or cafeterias. So that was another Uber pool kind of a model that we worked on. It's called the Magic Wheels, where we had to do a lot of research, work with a lot of food technologists, see how the quality of excess food could be checked at various levels of while picking up, before distribution, etc., to ensure that the food was fit for consumption. So that was a program developed when we realized there's a lot of excess food which cannot be done by volunteers. Then slowly we understood how there's people are calling us to donate 1 meal or half a sandwich or like half a pizza that is left over. And again, it would not be the best use of resources for a volunteer to go and pick that up from a house. And that's where the community fridge concept was developed, which is technically a refrigerator kept near a community gate, where anyone who has excess food could keep it, and anyone who wants food can take it out with dignity. So instead of a volunteer going out and picking up 1 slice of pizza, you as a resident of that community can put that excess food in the fridge, and people can take it out irrespective of time and all of that. So we developed how to check models of quality, how to inform citizens and residents nearby, how to inform the beneficiaries nearby. So again, that was a project that came out of a specific need of volunteers not being able to pick up food in small quantities. And the last program that we developed was like a daily feeding program, which was more for sustained efforts, when we realized that excess food is not a guaranteed food support. And sometimes specific beneficiary segments like children or elderly or pregnant and lactating women need specific kind of nutrition to be able to, be healthy. And that's where we set up a very lean model, where we identified, certain kitchen partners who would cook food for us in a hygienic manner at nutritious food at economical costs. And at the same time, we identified these network of not-for-profit partners spread across the country who have identified these beneficiaries in need. And then we link both these two to facilitate daily feeding programs. So as a team, we're just around 11 people, 11 full-time people, but we serve every day around 150,000 meals because of the lean models that we have. So we've really decentralized all our work with volunteers or with, these automated systems in a way, and these across these different programs. So what we literally have to do is just ensure that there is quality of work being done instead of us being on ground and executing the work. So these are some of the programs that we've developed, with public participation, which was the volunteer model, with solving food wastage at a community level with the community fridge, solving food wastage in bulk models, which through the Uber pool method, and just figuring out sustained nutritious food support through our kitchen feeding programs.
That's so amazing. Like, you really thought about every single level when you guys were developing this, and it's just so impressive. It's really, really exciting to me. One of the pieces I kind of want to hear a little bit more about is your volunteer models, because they're so critical and so essential, like you said, to like the entire organization. And I know earlier on you mentioned about one of the challenges was really establishing empathy within like the country, and like, can you talk a little bit about where those two things tied? Like, was it we developed empathy through this method first, and that's how we recruited volunteers? Or was it an organic process that came up because people started volunteering? I'm curious to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it was it's like a chicken and egg situation, I would say. I think we really had to motivate the first level of volunteers to really join us, and these volunteers in turn then helped us spread more awareness and help get more people on board. So it went like very like a word of mouth. We and everything went through social media. So volunteers were so passionate, the initial few volunteers, and they enjoyed the work so much that more people looking at them would volunteer and join us. The initial few days, I remember, I think it was through friends and family and colleagues that we really pushed out the message. And then we started getting a lot of different stakeholders involved. So we realized we got celebrity chefs on board, even though when we were really, really small. But I think the power of the campaign and the power of the cause was so strong that, and people realized that nothing like this existed in the country, which is why there was a need to really talk about it. And food is something that is so special for especially Indians, and I'm sure everyone across the world, that no one likes seeing it go waste. So that really touched a special chord, and we really developed our communication in a way that people were compelled to take some action, whether it was volunteer or just spread awareness about the cause through social media. And I think that really helped snowballed and got us more and more volunteers. Within 3 weeks, we had volunteer requests from not Delhi, but different parts of the country. And that's when we realized that, people are interested and they would want to do similar things in their own cities. And I think that's how it really just started. What I think the special part about it was that we did not give any monetary incentives for people to like take action. We really just thought about what really motivated them and customized and developed roles for them in the organization. So for example, we realized that people either care about the cause, of course. Second is that they care about developing themselves personally and professionally. And third, that they just want like a sense of belonging and want to be part of a larger community of like-minded people. And that's how we made it like, we gave them roles for leadership. We gave them direct ways to contribute on ground. We also developed different ways for them to really, really work towards uh, as a community, as groups, as leaders. I think that really motivated and started a chain of self-motivated people, and they got more people on board. I think that's
Yeah.
how it really kicked off.
Yeah, it's just like a chain reaction. Like you inspired a few and then they inspired more and you just created this huge system. That's awesome. Which is a really nice segue because I kind of want to learn a little bit more. You talked about how you grew or how the volunteer network really grew, but can you talk more about how Feeding India started to scale up? And like, I know you mentioned like a few like non-traditional partnerships and mechanisms that you kind of took to really grow the organization. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it was in around 3 to 4 years of Feeding India, we focused a lot on creating awareness and building that first sense of credibility with the organization. And that's when we actually saw the model working. We got recognized by the Queen of England, from the United Nations, the president, the prime minister of our country, etc. So I think in initial few years, a lot of recognition came in that really put us up on the map of becoming a leading organization solving hunger. And at that time we realized that we really need to not just do good work but scale it a lot for us to reach more people. And like we're coming from a business mindset, and for us it was something like a CDC funding, that you have you have your products, you have your solutions, you've tested it out with a few people, and now you need to scale that. So for us to scale that to more people, we needed more investment. And we realized public and private partners and sectors had to come together to really scale this impact exponentially. And that's when we got in touch with Zomato, which is India's leading food tech delivery organization, much like Uber Eats or like DoorDash in the US. And and that's and we merged with them. So Zomato acquired Feeding India in a way to accelerate our impact. So what it meant was that we now had, as an organization, access to more an investor network for funding, to the best of experts in in the Zomato network, to a user base of millions of people who could now listen to our message instead of a few thousands that we had before. So it was just really, really helpful for us to get into that network, to really grow our organization. And that really catapulted our impact to another level. So if we served around, say, 30 million meals in the first 4 years of the organization, in 1 year later, post acquisition, we served around 80 million meals. So that made our impact 3x. Our funding increased 10x, and everything just grew from there. So I think that was a very unique decision, I would say, because never in India, and I could not find an example anywhere else in the world, was where a for-profit organization acquired a not-for-profit. And I think, of course, it was a risky decision, but it did pay off, and did what it intended to do, to help us scale. Yep.
So how does this work with Zomato now? Because I know I've seen a little bit of like Uber Eats, and sometimes where they're trying to mitigate like plastic wastage. So they will ask you, do you want, forks or whatever, and you can click no. But tell me a little bit more about how that partnership with Zomato kind of started to work.
Yeah, so it is. So Feeding India is an integral part of Zomato in a way that it's in every essence of the organization. So we work and we leverage the network of experts that they have in terms of auditing, compliance, legal, finance, human resources. So instead of us investing in that resource as an organization, we save on our administrative cost by leveraging their expertise. Secondly, again, like you mentioned, Uber Eats has a little check on their app. Zomato also has integrated Feeding India on its mobile application to the millions of users that they have. So every month we get a few $1 million just because of one checkbox that the users are able to donate to Feeding India. And that really funds a lot of our projects and impact that we do on ground. That gives us that sustainable funding for us to reach people in a sustainable manner. So apart from not just fundraising in monetary capacity that they're able to help us, it's that network that we have access to, it's the expertise that we are able to reach, it's the outreach that we're able to do through their users and customers.
Yeah, totally. And I know you mentioned that they have so much to offer besides that funding that you get from that piece. But I feel like in public health work, like funding is so critical, right? Like everything relies on, we have to design this project for this grant to get funding this way. And you talked about so many ways that you guys kind of didn't go this traditional public health route of like applying to a grant and applying to a funder or donor or anything like that. And one of the ways was how you acquired those fridges for the Happy Fridge. So can you talk a little bit about that experience? Because I know the public health folks would be so interested to learn about that partnership as well.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, our way to think about projects was not in a very conventional way. So if you had to go the traditional route and say a fridge would cost us, say, anywhere between, say, $200, $300 per fridge, right? But what we did instead, we partnered with companies who would just then give that fridge to us in kind. Instead, what we spend that money that we could say use that $300 to take one fridge, we spend that on our advertising. So what we did was we went to the top refrigeration companies of the country and said, okay, why don't you donate fridges to us for free? And what we will do is have your branding on those fridges instead. So it is like a win-win situation where they are in residential colonies where they eventually want to sell their products, and there's a lot of visibility and eyeballs and branding for them, and at the same time we get like a asset there for free, of course, and we don't have to pay for that, and we just now need to facilitate that process. So generally, as an organization, we believe as a value in frugality and doing less with doing more with less. And I think that was a classic example of going to companies and knowing what they're best at and telling them to do that for us. So instead of me going to redeveloping, say, another example for that actually is that me developing a food technology or process or standard operating procedure to check the quality of food, I would rather go to a company which is great at it already and ask them to give their expertise. So that just ensures that you get the best product, the best quality, and then you get that and you create value for that organization to partner with you. And I think that is something like a partnership is very more needed in the country, just generally, because that is a win-win partnership for the partners, because they're not contributing monetary as such. They're giving what they already do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it makes a sustainable organization, right? Because like I think particularly in food systems and food programs, it's such a large issue. And like you said, it's not the lack of, I guess, resources, right? Like the lack of refrigerators. It's not the lack of ways to transport the food. It's really just that lack of funding and finding ways to kind of, create sustainable systems that will work. So it's just so crazy that you guys figured this out. You partnered with the fridges that are part of that food system. You partnered with the transportation and the food tech people and all of these different partners to create this organization that is combating the mission and doing it doing the work.
And just another example for that is when there was an emergency situation in the country with COVID or just generally any natural disaster. So instead of us spending money on transportation, we would rather just go to like a Uber or like any other Lyft or something like that and ask them to donate their man hours. So and donate their time of their Uber drivers or their staff. So that just it's called connected capitalism, where you go to people who do what they do and ask them to contribute. So it just makes for an easy food system and like you said, a sustainable way to develop a system.
We need connective capitalism and more public health work. Okay, so we're approaching the end, but I do want to ask kind of just one last question about like what's on your mind. What are you thinking about? Is there anything that's exciting coming for Feeding India, or anything that you kind of just want to share as last thoughts for the group before we move into the Q&A?
Yeah, I think as an organization, we are working to, of course, expand our programs and help more people. Like I said, we're supporting 150,000 people every day, and we want to get to like a 250,000 people by the end of March next year. The goal is to get to more tier 2, tier 3 cities where India has like a hunger index where they've ranked cities that are high and are in critical need of food support. So the goal is to get more into those cities and help more people in need, and just get to the kind of beneficiary groups that need more food support. So I think the emphasis now is just increasing more on quality of impact, increasing, of course, the reach of our impact. And generally, I think as a individual, the country have like an exponential impact generally. Like, an investment in women is an investment in the entire families and communities. So personally on that front, I feel, I want to work more in the field of giving women equal opportunities, in terms of giving them food, but even more directly in terms of pursuing their entrepreneurial interests, etc. So just creating a more equitable world with the help of supporting them with food, and being able to pursue equal opportunities like anyone else.
Love that. I'm excited to see how it kind of grows and where we go from that. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to go ahead and move into just a Q&A section. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute and turn your camera on if you feel comfortable, or you can also put them in the chat and I will read them off.
I'll go first unless anyone else has anything. But Srishti, I was just wondering, is there anything that makes you really optimistic? Or maybe on the flip side, is there anything that you feel pessimistic about kind of looking at the future, especially with COVID and everything, and your work and, food security in general?
Yeah, I feel generally, I think there, during COVID, we realized that there was a lot of disconnectedness in the country. Like there were a lot of not-for-profits and just efforts being made on ground that for people that needed food support, but there was a lot of duplication of efforts as well. So there were a lot of people who were getting a lot, and there were a lot of people who did not get anything. And I think there was a lot of scope on what can be that can be done to make it better, in terms of a national movement or a national platform that coordinates efforts on ground, which it looks at data, looks at possible areas and gaps, and prioritizes support. I think that is something that I saw that there was a need for, and it is kind of pessimistic. Like, you feel kind of irritated that why does this not already exist? Like, everyone should have access to that information, where where exactly how many people are hungry, right? We're in that scenario where when we order food, it gets delivered to us in less than 30 minutes, but we don't know who's in need next to our houses. So I think that kind of a database or like a system should exist, and should start to exist for anyone to transparently support each other. And as a food system, and that is something that is really the basic of a food system, I would say. For us to really progress in sustainable systems, I think access to information is something that should be readily available with each other. Only then can people take action or independently and still contribute to the overall mission.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, I really do, resonate with that, because some sort of like open source data system, where just like, I think, like you said, we have to all kind of contribute to that data in order to see it grow. But that's a really good point. Thank you for the question, Sophie. If anybody else has a question, feel free to chime in.
I do. I was super fascinated by the discussion of approaching Feeding India as a management problem instead of a kind of traditional nonprofit approach. How did you, especially, kind of being relatively new in your career, how did you come to that, at what I would call a pretty profound insight really early?
I think maybe it was because I was young and I felt that, there's no time to waste. It felt like an easy solution to not, I think it was just the young attitude, I would say, at the time, where you saw so many efforts already being made since decades and not contributing to any success. So just questioning that more on how could things be done better? I think in India, or just generally, not-for-profits are really looked at in a very traditional manner, where the point is to exist, right? That you are serving a cause, but then the point is to exist. I think the impatience in me really prompted me to just figure out a way to, how do you solve it and move on, rather than how do you just carry that same problem for years and years to come. So I think that maybe I would say just the impatience in me to solve the problem rather than keep working on it.
I totally love that. So that insight about nonprofits have historically just tried to keep existing is something that we talk about quite a bit. So how do you think we change that model? And I recognize this is a crazy hard question, and I'm not asking it flippantly. I actually, I'm really fascinated by the way that you think about it.
Yeah, I think, there has been a lot of change in the mindsets of not-for-profits now. And I think that is because there's so much more awareness with the donors, right? Even companies and corporates who are giving part of their social responsibility are not just now. And of course, there's a majority of people who give very casually, but there are a lot of grants and people who are very intelligent about their giving. And only not-for-profits need to make that change for them to access that funding, right? So I think the point is now how to create sustainable programs. Corporates and donors are now asking better questions, such as, what is your exit plan with a project? How is your project more sustainable? How do you ensure that when the funding comes out, the people are not deprived of the support that they were before? How do they not return to the same stage? So I think those questions, and not-for-profits are being asked to work harder. I think that is something that would eventually get that change. But I think we still have a long, long way to go. A lot of funding in the world just goes on to immediate relief rather than sustainable efforts. And I think that is something that we definitely need to change. Just as an example, when COVID happened, we should already have these food systems in place to support these people. Why did not-for-profits organizations have to step up so much to support people in need? Right? We should not have that. There have been millions of people who have been added to the poverty list because of not having food support, or just generally support that should already be exist in the country. So I think not-for-profit organizations, there are changes that are happening because of this mindset change with responsible donors, and I think that this will keep increasing in the coming few years.
I love that perspective of responsible donors and really placing, the responsibility on them as funders to help hold accountable. So that's great answer. We have a question in the chat, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it. It's from Diego. Can you share how strategies have changed in terms of organizations becoming partners while they have seen the impact created to the community?
I don't think I quite understood the question. If you could
Diego.
just like.
Yeah, Diego, do you want to unmute and clarify? But I'm going to go ahead and read it one more time while you're unmuting. Can you share how strategies have changed in terms of organizations becoming partners? Basically, I think Diego's trying to say, like, while they've seen the impact created to the community. But Diego, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I was just trying to gather, like, I'm pretty sure that when the organization started, you had a certain set of strategies set, right? And there was some impact created in the communities, and other organizations became aware of the impact, and now they want to be also a partner. So that interest of other organizations wanting to be part of this impact have caused that any of the strategies have changed, and if that's so.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's been like a long journey of that change as well. I think I remember how when we were a little organization, every partner felt like, oh, we need to get them on board, right? If there's an incoming lead, or if there's someone who we feel is interested, we would push the world around for them to get them on board and get them to help us, even if it was the littlest help. And I think that was really valuable at the time. But I think now, there's been a shift in the strategy where we focus more on impact versus effort. Right. And what we've really prioritized our donors in a way that we focus on people who, again, are aligned with our vision. Right. So as a small team, like I said, we're just 11, 12 people. Right. And there's only so much level of, customization, or I would say, different things that we can take up. So, for example, if you're working on a feeding program, we cannot go into like a blood donation camp. Right, even if the partner would want us to do that. So I think as a team, we've really prioritized more on term and developed like a matrix between our partners, between effort versus impact, to focus more on high impact and low effort partners, and help and stick proactively and very consciously stick to our programs and not deviate, because the more we deviate, the more the more pressure it puts on our small team, and we're not able to prioritize a focus. So it's just technically, and it's a very strategic thing that I'm mentioning here, because any deviation from going to a blood donation or organizing a clothing drive, rather than or even as small as focusing, say something specific, organizing a marketing event would really put a lot of pressure on my team, whereas the opportunity cost for them could be contacting more partners with high value donors who are easy to work with. So it's a very strategic decision that we've changed the way how we work with partners over time, and we've developed that very loyal donor base who work with us, who love what we do, and who we are working with since a long time. Yeah.
That was a great question, Diego. It sounds like you really kind of developed a system for prioritizing partners, similar to the way in public health we prioritize, interventions or needs or those kind of things. So it's really interesting to hear that perspective of how you approach that.
Yeah, because as a founder, as a person in the team, you always want to get everyone on board, but then you have to have that proactive call of not always customizing your processes, because that you end up losing out more in the process. I think that's just the learning that we've had over the years of not achieving targets, not fulfilling what we've done, and then figuring out what went wrong and fixing it.
Yeah. If anybody else has a question, feel free to chime in. If not, I do have one that kind of segues really nicely. So I'll give it a second and see if anybody has one. Okay, so I was wondering,
sorry, I do have a quick question.
Go ahead, Liz.
Yes, so I was just wondering, how has COVID-19 affected or exacerbated food insecurity in India, and how has Feeding India stepped in to either fill the gap? Have you had to restructure any of your initiatives, and if so, how, in what ways?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So prior to the pandemic, majorly our food meals were consisting of excess food. But now, because of the lockdown and the pandemic, the restaurants were shut, corporate offices were shut, everyone was working from home. There were very little or equal to no event or gatherings or weddings or functions. So a supply of excess food dropped to zero, and we had to overnight pivot to a grocery only model, where then we had to distribute ration kits and dry food packets to our beneficiaries, because we could not leave them stranded. We had to still support them with food, but we had to change the way we looked at food. So instead of only excess food, we then shifted to dry pulses and food. What we did during COVID actually was we organized one of the largest food relief drives in the country, where we raised almost, I would say, $15 million in the span of a few months. Actually, 10 million of those dollars was raised in a month. And we not just worked on food support, we also had to pivot from what we do because of the need of the country. So as an organization, we realized that we have strong distribution networks and we have strong presence on ground, and we leveraged that. So even when, during the second wave, which happened early this year in India, we realized that the country needed oxygen support. And even though that is something that we're not specialized in, we're only looking at food, but our network, our processes, our systems, and our outreach helped us raise funds and deploy those resources on ground very effectively. So we ventured into that as well, because that was something that the country needed at the time. And we, like I said, raised around $10 million for that in a span of 4 weeks. And we imported oxygen concentrators in India. So it was, of course, our core work changed in terms of our offering from excess food to prepared cooked meals or dry ration kits, but also we did venture out a little bit more to support people in need at the time that they needed. But of course, that this is something that we never usually do, but did that only as an exception because that was something that the country drastically needed at that time.
Thank you for the question. We have one final question in the chat, and then that's going to be the last question, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So this is from John. I would wonder what are the support from Indian authorities to your organization?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So in India, as an organization, there's limited support from the government for not-for-profits, but of course in this, not in terms of funding. Of course, funding is limited for not-for-profits, but there are other kinds of support. So the government has been really instrumental in helping us further our cause. For example, there's the FDA in the US. There's a similar authority in India that helps develop food safety standards for all products, all anything related to food in the country. So that they've actually helped push out a law or institutionalize a regulation that helped excess food distribution. Before that, there was no legalization in the country that even allowed excess food to be distributed. So we worked, they realized the good work that we were doing and they looped us in. And then we helped them actually launch this legalization in the country. And that not just benefited us, but around 100 plus not-for-profits to actually give validity to the work that they did. So everyone was just distributing meals on their own without any permission or without any authority by the government. And that sometimes, even though it was not illegal, it was safe, but that was still very partners were very hesitant to partner because there was no official recognition of the cause. So government of India actually helped us legalize that and bring credibility to the work that we and so many other partners was also doing. And apart from that, I think the government has also been really instrumental in just spreading awareness about the cause. They've introduced a lot of policies around how to solve urban poor and how to urban hunger in the country. Directly to us, I think they've been helpful, especially during the COVID pandemic, on channelizing on ground, helping us get permissions. There was limited mobility on ground at that time. So helping us coordinate all that effort on ground. Yeah.
That was just the perfect question to close us off, because we touched another area of the food system that you worked within, working with the food policy. And I think it just leaves us on such a good note, kind of just really illustrating again how successful Feeding India has become, because you guys have really found the ways to work with all of these different systems. So with that, I just want to say thank you again for this amazing conversation. It was great to talk to you, and Diego probably has some closing comments to close us off.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.